Birds Appear, Alaska's Yellow-billed Loons, a production of Alaska Teen Media Institute, in collaboration with the National Park Service, Bureau of Land Management, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Alaska Geographic, Wildlife Conservation Society.
One thing about a yellow-bill is that they're definitely a
Jim Helmericks, homesteader on the Colville River.
majestic bird, large, and once you've heard their calls, why, you'll never forget it.
Yellow-billed loons float along the edge of a large lake.
We know that they...
Dr. Angela Matz, Environmental Contaminants Branch Chief, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
They breed
loon diving into the lake.
In a very restricted area, pretty much north of 60 degrees latitude in big
Aerial
lakes
view of large lakes on tundra.
The type of habitat that they use, the other loons don't utilize, so they nest in deep water lakes.
Loon on nest.
Where the other loons nest in smaller ponds and have to bring food into the young, where the yellow-bills
Red-throated loons float along the edge of the lake.
Get enough food for their young out of the lake that they're nesting on.
Melanie Freeman, National Park Service biologist.
Being considered for listing under the Endangered Species Act because of its low global population size, its low reproductive rate, and concerns about overharvest.
Loon floating on the lake.
And that decision will be made in September of this year, 2014.
Teena Helmericks, homesteader on the Colville River.
We've had a yellow-billed loon, at least one pair on our lake.
Yellow-billed loons float along the edge of a large lake.
On our property here every single year since families have ever lived here since the mid-1950s. In our immediate area, it really hasn't made a difference. They've stayed about the same.
Some of the reasons that we are considering yellow-billed loons as a species of concern are because they have a very small global population size. There's only 16 to 21,000 birds, and that's a very rough estimate.
Loon
worldwide.
floating on the lake.
The analysis under the Endangered Species Act takes all that into account. What do we know about them in the past? What do we know about them right now? What kind of threats or pressures do we think that species is facing? And what can we say, and how much certainty can we say it with, about what's going to happen in the future?
We don't have a lot of information about the birds when they're off the breeding ground.
Yellow-billed loons float along the edge of a large lake.
There are birds that are failed nesters or too young to compete for ideal nest sites. We don't know very much about them. So if there was something like an oil spill or some catastrophic event that happened, we wouldn't have a lot of information about how those birds would respond or be affected.
And so my role is to examine that. And we do that by taking
shot
samples
of person swabbing 2 loon eggs in a grassy area.
For the contaminants
Image,
or the
man wading in a
chemicals
lake.
of concern that are in them. They are toxic. They can cause damage to, particularly to developing
close-up
young,
of loon egg and nest.
Bird embryos in an egg.
In terms of the effects on the local people, we will need to be really proactive in working with folks who are subsistence users or recreational users in the area about the additional protections and considerations that we need to give the birds.
Yellow-billed loons flap wings in Tundra Lake.
The climate is changing.
Close-up of loon in lake.
We've got some critters that we might not see anymore if the climate continues to change.
They're definitely a species of concern and probably will continue to be a species of concern. Those big Arctic lakes on top of
aerial view of large lakes on tundra
that they nest on. That whole tundra might be changing. We know that they're not very common now. We know that they probably were never very common. In the future, we
loon in lake at sunset.
don't know what's going to happen.
Scene fades, credits appear. Produced by Dave Dunham-Kelsa and Sam Burnitz. Sponsor logos appear. Alaska Teen Media Institute, alaskateenmedia.org, National Park Service, Bureau of Land Management, Wildlife Conservation Society, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Alaska Geographic, Muir Science and Learning Center.